بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على المصطفى محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم، واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا، حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. In our last lesson, we shed light on the first Ghazwa of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, the first battle that is actually called a Ghazwa. We said that it was Ghazwat Buwaat, and we mentioned that Buwaat is a place that falls between Mecca and Medina, and that in this battle a fight did not actually take place. So it's called a Ghazwa, it's called a battle, but a fight did not happen. The battle in which fighting actually took place between the two armies, the first battle in which that happened was the Battle of Badr. Inshallah, we're getting closer to that very important event in the history of Islam. So we mentioned that in Ghazwat al-Buwaat there was a sulh, there was a peace treaty that was done between Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and a group of people, and this was a beautiful result. A beautiful result stemming from Ghazwat al-Buwaat. We mentioned that Islam, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, they prefer solving things in a peaceful manner over solving things with, brute force, with fighting. So this was one of the good results of Ghazwat al-Buwaat. جيد. بس توطي الصوت عني. You good? Okay. Now, one question came to mind. We also shed light on the second Ghazwa. Let me just open the book of Sheikh Abbas, rahimahullah. Known as Ghazwat Buwaat. We mentioned Ghazwat Buwaat, right? Last week? We did mention, that's what I remember. And according to Sheikh Abbas al-Qummi rahmatullah ta'ala alayhi, Ghazwat al-Buwaat was between the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam and between Quraysh and Bani Dumra, right? Yes, you can close the door. Between Quraysh and Bani Dumra, the Prophet ended up performing a peace treaty with Bani Dumra. Sayyid Ja'far Murtada Quddisa Sirruh, in As-Sahih min Sirat al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, he mentioned that there was a peace treaty done between who? Between the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi and between Bani Murrah, right? Let's look at Sayyid Ja'far's word again. He says, فَتَلَقَّاهُ سَيِّدْ بَنِي مُرَّ بِالْأَبْوَاءِ فَصَالَحَهُ. Right? And then, regarding Ghazwat Buwaat, when we were talking about Ghazwat Buwaat, the second Ghazwa of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in As-Sahih min Sirat al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, the Prophet mentioned, Sayyid Ja'far here did not mention who Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi was seeking, correct? He mentioned Bani Dumra. He mentioned Bani Dumra in Ghazwat Buwaat. Sheikh Abbas al-Qummi rahimahullah mentioned Quraysh in Ghazwat Buwaat. So this kind of brought some confusion. بس ننهي الصوت إذا أمكن. مش الحال؟ مش مشكلة فيكم تعملوا log out, it's fine, no problem. Okay, so this kind of caused some confusion last week, right? That the confusion was because when we mentioned Ghazwat al-Buwaat, we said that the Prophet ﷺ made a peace treaty with Bani Dumra. Then when we mentioned Ghazwat Buwaat, it mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslimin, they were after a caravan. For who? For Bani Dumra. And this caused confusion. If there was a peace treaty between Rasulullah ﷺ and Bani Dumra, then why would they be after a caravan for Bani Dumra? Sahih? So here is the answer. We have to remember that we were citing two different sources. Jayyid? We were citing two different sources. For as-Sahih min Sirat al-Nabi, when we look at Sahih min Sirat al-Nabi, for Sayyid Ja'far Murtada, Quddisa Sirruh, he mentions that the first Ghazwa was between Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa and Quraysh, and who? And Bani Murrah. Bani Murrah. When does Sayyid Ja'far mention Bani Dumra? In the second Ghazwa. So based on whatever he was mentioning, based on the historians that he was citing, he was telling us in As-Sahih min Sirat al-Nabi that the Prophet ﷺ performed a peace treaty with Bani Murrah. Make sense? But if we go to Kihl al-Basar for Shaykh Abbas al-Qummi rahimahullah, he says otherwise. He says the first battle was between the Prophet and Bani Dumra. The second one was between the Prophet and Quraysh. Does that make sense? Bani Dumra and Quraysh? Ahsant, they must be two different groups of people. Yeah, Bani Murrah and Bani Dumra must be two different groups of people. Or else why would the Prophet ﷺ perform a peace treaty with Bani Dumra and then go after their caravan? There's a peace treaty between them and Bani Dumra. Make sense? Yeah. So what I'm trying to say, the students who were present last week know what I'm talking about. What I'm trying to say is the Sayyid Ja'far rahmatullah ta'ala alayh mentioned some details regarding the first two Ghazawat that were a bit different than what Shaykh Abbas al-Qummi mentioned in Kihl al-Basar. He mentioned that the first Ghazwa was between the Prophet and Quraysh and who? And Bani Murrah. Shaykh Abbas mentioned Bani Dumra, not Murrah, Dumra in the first Ghazwa. In the second Ghazwa, known as Ghazwat Buwaat, Sayyid Ja'far mentioned who? He mentioned Bani Dumra this time. Shaykh Abbas rahimahullah mentioned Quraysh, not Bani Dumra. So I just wanted to shed light on this point and say that such differences are seen sometimes when we look at historical events and we look into different historical sources. When we look at different historical sources or we look at different books that mention these historical events, sometimes you will find such differences. Jayyid? So as an example, when we get to Badr, if you read what happened in Badr from a specific source, let's say Tariq al-Tabari, and then you go to another book, for example, Muruj al-Dhahab or in Mas'udi, and you read the details of Badr, you might find certain details that are different. Certain details that al-Tabari and al-Mas'udi differ on. That's normal. Okay? So such differences are witnessed when someone looks at multiple sources and analyzes a particular historical event. The bottom line is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would never break a peace treaty between him and a group of people unless those people did something that indicated that the peace treaty was nullified. That's a given. Shukran. All right. That being said, we have a few points to add today regarding Ghazwat Buwaat, and we also want to mention the third Ghazwa known as Ghazwat al-Ushayra. Ghazwat al-Ushayra. Al-Ushayra. Right now we're going to focus on Ghazwat Buwaat, which is the second Ghazwa. Number one, Ghazwat Buwaat took place in Rabi' al-Awwal. It is also said that it took place in Rabi' al-Thani. So this is the time in which the Ghazwa took place. It took place in Rabi' al-Awwal. It is said also that it took place in Rabi' al-Thani. Why is it called Buwaat? Ghazwat Buwaat. Buwaat is the name of a mountain. That falls between Mecca and Medina. And apparently Buwaat is close to a mountain called Radwa. Why am I mentioning this? Because in Dua al-Nudba, there's a segment where we ask Sahib al-Zaman, Ajallah ta'ala farajahu al-Sharif, where are you? Are you in Radwa? Am Dhi Tuwa? Or are you in Dhi Tuwa? Perhaps this is the Radwa that the dua is referring to. A mountain. Radwa is also a mountain between Mecca and Medina. Yes, Mohammed. Ghazwa? What does Ghazwa mean, Shabab? Let's test your memory. Yeah.
A battle in which the prophet, or an event in which the prophet himself was
Ahsantum. Yeah. So that's a Ghazwa. If a battle happened or was about to happen and the Prophet was present with the Muslimin in that event, it's the Ghazwa. If, however, the Prophet sent a group of Muslims to fight, or a fight was about to happen between them and a group of people, even though the fight, even if a fight did not actually take place, it's called a Sariyah. Sariyah. Also called a Ba'tha. واضح? So a Ghazwa would be like Khandaq, Ghazwat al-Khandaq, Badr, Hunayn, Uhud. A Sariyah would be like Mu'tah. Mu'tah. Or the events we mentioned prior to Ghazwat al-Abwa. Okay? Going back to Buwat, another important fact to keep in mind is that Al-Kaysaniya, sorry, we were saying Buwat is close to what? To Radwa, right? Al-Kaysaniya, they claim that Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiya, rahmatullah ta'ala alayh, is in Radwa. He's in Radwa. He's alive. He's sustained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he remains there. Kaysaniya were who? Kaysaniya were a group of people who deviated. They claimed that Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiya was the fourth Imam. He said he is the fourth Imam, not Ali ibn al-Hussein alayhi salam, and he in fact is the last Imam. So he is the promised Mahdi and he's still alive. Now he's hiding where? In Radwa. جيد. طبعا it seems that there are no more Kaysaniya today, but previously there were. But they believed that Muhammad ibn Hanafiya was the fourth Imam. Muhammad, by the way, was a good man. He was the son of Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam and was a noble Sayyid, rahmatullah ta'ala alayh. But he was not an Imam. He was not chosen by Allah ta'ala to be an Imam. All right? And there was an event between him and Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam pertaining to the black stone, which we can mention one day. Perhaps I mentioned it before, Jayyid, in which Muhammad basically wanted to show the people that he was not the Imam. And the rightful Imam was Ali ibn al-Hussein alayhi salam. But the sad news is a group of people did claim that he was an Imam. And they deviated. Which reminds us of number one, the danger of following our own desires instead of following Allah's command, subhanahu wa ta'ala, following our own desires instead of following Allah's guidance. Secondly, it reminds us of the fact that sometimes you might have a misled group of people who claim to follow a particular person, but that person does not have to do anything with those people. He is not associated with them. Jayyid. Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiya is a good example, alayhi salam. Another good example is Ismail. Ismail alayhi salam, or rahmatullah alayh, the son of Imam al-Sadiq, is not the founder of Ismailism, al-Ismailiyah, right? The Ismailiyah deviated after Imam al-Sadiq, and they disbelieved in the Imam of Imam al-Kadhim and the rest of the Imams, salawatullah alayhim, the rest of the Imams of Ahl al-Bayt. But Ismail is not the founder of that sect. Yes. No, they say that he is an Imam, right? Or at least some of them say that he is the Imam. But the thing is, Ismail died before Imam al-Sadiq, salawatullah wa salamu alayh, right? So he cannot technically be the Imam after his father. The following Imam has to live at least for a day, right? Or a moment before he has to live at least for a day or a moment after the Imam that precedes him, right? Yeah. وإياكم. What's also absurd is that they said Muhammad is the last Imam, and he's only the fourth based on their beliefs, right? For us, he's not an Imam. But they're saying he's the fourth and he's the last. But how could that be? Where are the rest of the Imams? Alayhim salam. We have 12 Imams. Salamullah alayhim. Which tells you or reminds you that when a person wants to blind himself and accept any idea or belief, even if it is clearly wrong, he can blind himself and he will follow that idea, unfortunately. All right, Shaykh Abbas al-Qummi rahimahullah, he mentioned in Kihl al-Basar that the Prophet in Ghazwat Buwaat, sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, he came with 200 of his companions and he wanted to block the path of the caravan of Quraysh, which obviously would carry goods with it, different kinds of merchandise and or commodities. Now, when he left Ghazwa, when he was on his way, when he left Al-Madinah, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam left a man called As-Sa'ib ibn Uthman ibn Mad'un in Medina. And he was in charge of what? Of protecting Al-Madinah, taking care of Al-Madinah during the Prophet's absence, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. Sa'd ibn Uthman ibn Mad'un. Which also reminds us of another very important reality. What is that reality? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa, when he would leave al-Medina, he would not leave it without a caretaker. Jayyid. Hence, when he left to meet the Romans, to face the Romans in Ghazwat Tabuk, inshallah we'll get to Ghazwat Tabuk one day. Not this year for sure, but someday inshallah. This was near the end of his life, sallallahu alayhi wa. He left Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam in al-Medina. The situation was very difficult, was very tough, and the Prophet needed to face the Romans, but at the same time, because of the difficult circumstances that were taking place, someone like the Prophet had to stay in Medina. Who was like the Prophet? Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam. Right? He's the walking, talking, breathing Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. So he had to leave him in Medina. Such that the Prophet had basically only two choices. Either he leaves to face the Romans and Ali stays, or Ali leaves and the Prophet stays. One of the two had to stay in Medina. Jayyid. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, whenever he would leave Medina, he would leave someone in charge of Medina. What does that have to do with our topic, or what does that have to do with with our beliefs? Oh, well, if the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, does not leave Medina during his lifetime without leaving someone in charge of Medina, then how could he leave his ummah after his death without a caretaker? Right? We're saying this because the Sunnis claim that the Prophet died without appointing a Khalifa. And that now it was upon us to choose the Caliph of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa. Right? But wait for a second. Hold on for a second. If the Prophet does not leave Medina for an X amount of days or months, without a caretaker, then how could he leave his ummah, not only in Medina, the mudun, the cities of Islam, the state, the Islamic state, without someone who would take care of the Muslimin, without a guide, someone who would protect the Muslimin and protect Islam after him? So these narrations that we see when we read history, which tell us Rasulullah left, for example, Ibn Maktoum in charge of Medina when he left Medina, or he appointed, as we said, As-Sa'ib ibn Uthman ibn Mad'un to be in charge of Medina, to protect al-Medina when he's absent, sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, during his absence. These narrations indirectly confirm that the Prophet must appoint a caliph. He must appoint someone to be his successor and to be the caretaker of Islam and the Muslimin after him. Of course, when we say he appoints the caliph, we mean he appoints the caliph based on Allah's commands. Allah Azza wa Jal appoints the caliph, Allah appoints the imam, and the Prophet reveals to the Muslims who did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appoint. These small details, my friends, that might seem not so important for some people, are in reality important. Sometimes by simply looking at a small detail regarding an event, regarding a battle, regarding some other occurrence which took place during the Prophet's time, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, might prove a very important point regarding imama or other Islamic beliefs. Any questions on Buwaat? Ghazwat Buwaat? No questions? Yes, Ahmed. They went to basically block the path of the caravan. The narration here says يعترض عيرا لقريش. يعترض means he's going to block the path, not necessarily take whatever is in it. He's simply blocking it. Yes. The Prophet and his men, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He had 200 companions with him.
Was it successful or not successful?
Here he doesn't mention. Let me see what. Yes, no battle took place. No battle took place. An actual fight did not happen. Yeah. Yeah, even Sayyid Jafar, rahimahullah, he says, يعترض عير بني ضمرة, right? فبلغ بواطا ورجع ولم يلق كيدا. So he doesn't exactly mention what happened with the caravan. Perhaps the Prophet blocked the path, and then the caravan took another path, and that's it. جيد. We mentioned last week, if you remember, one of the benefits of these events which took place before Badr, when we said that the Prophet was giving Quraysh an implicit message that you should not assume that you can, roam freely in Arabia from now on. And you should not assume that you can simply come and attack us whenever you wish. That's not the case. Do not assume that the Muslimin are, as weak as they were, or they seemed they were when they were in Mecca. Things have changed. Jayid? Yes. Well, Quraysh had oppressed the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslimin for 13 years, and they had even killed some Muslimin. Yeah. So there was a lot of tension between Quraysh and between the Prophet and the Muslimin. They had caused them to leave their homes and migrate to Medina. Jayid. So because of the history that was between Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and between Quraysh, these events were taking place. In these events, no, but later on the battle will take place. The first battle in which a fight happens is Badr al-Kubra. Yeah. No, the running away takes place in Uhud. Yeah. And Hunayn. Yeah. And Hunayn, Ahsant, yeah. Each battle has its own details and its own important events. And you can break each battle into multiple events. Yeah. Are we out of time for today? Let me check how much time we have left. Seems that we are out of time. La ilaha illallah. 6 to 9, 3 hours. Yeah. All right. The next Ghazwa was Ghazwat al-Ushayra. Inshallah, next week we'll speak about it. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala al-Mustafa Muhammadin wa alihi al-Tahirin.